Day one of Baltimore Ravens mandatory minicamp officially in the books. And we talk about everything that happened, the defense dominating, the offense struggling, and so much more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day and a part of your day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. In audio form, wherever you get your favorite podcasts on your favorite podcasting platforms, be sure to follow along there and subscribe as well for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. As I mentioned, we are 5 days a week on Locked On Ravens, Monday through Friday. We don't miss an episode Monday through Friday. We are with you 5 days per week, always. And we had you cover with Ravens news, analysis, updates, and so much more. So tell a friend, tell a family member, we are here for them and for you. Daily Ravens coverage. I want to first give a big shout out to everybody on the video side of things. Obviously, audio form is a huge part of what we do as well. But on the video side, we hit a milestone. I've been talking about it for a while. 7,000 subscribers here on this channel. I can't thank everybody enough. For anybody who's watched one video, listened to one show in audio form, this doesn't go without you, doesn't go without the community. We've built up such amazing communities here on Locked On Ravens. And here's the 8,000. If you're an everyday, you listen to me every day. Thank you so much for tuning in every single day. If you're new to the channel, welcome in. If you want your daily Ravens coverage here, be sure to subscribe and follow along video form and audio form. And if you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back to the channel. Day one of mandatory minicamp in the books for Baltimore, and there is a lot, and I mean a lot to talk about here. We're going to talk about how each unit performed. Spoiler, defense shined, offense struggled. It was what happened, and we'll talk about what that means. Wasn't all bad for the offense, though. I do want to preface it with that. We will have some positives on the offensive side of the ball. So we'll talk about what happened in the first part of the show, and honestly, probably in the second as well. We're going to probably dedicate 2 segments to that. And then in the final part of the show, we'll talk about some press conference takeaways from Derrick Henry, John Harbaugh, especially he gave an update on Kyle Hamilton we're going to get to. That's important, and a lot more. So let's just jump right in talking about what happened on day one of minicamp. And again, you can't take away too much from both OTAs and minicamp, and honestly, the early portion of training camp, just because pads aren't on. To me, I think, and for a lot of people, pads are the key indicator, whether that's training camp, preseason, and games, obviously. But I think there's a little more you can take away from mandatory minicamp because you're doing more 11-on-11s in terms of everybody being there, right? Voluntary OTAs, not everybody's there. Mandatory minicamp, of course, that mandatory is the key word there. So the defense shined on the day. They were absolutely dominant. And again, shout out to everybody. You know, I'm pulling together all the reports, Jez Rebeck, Jonas Schaefer, Nikhil Mehta, all these guys. So shout out to everybody who was there. It'd take me a while to list off everybody, but again, appreciate everything and all the notes that we got. Now, in terms of the defense, Arthur Millette had a forced fumble in the recovery versus Zay Flowers, and later he intercepted Lamar Jackson. Roquan Smith also intercepted Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry, he bobbled a pass early, and Brandon Stevens caught it for a pick 6. It was that kind of day. I know a lot of people, when they hear about, Zay Flowers fumble, kind of takes you back to a game and a moment you don't want to go back to, myself included there. We're not going to talk about what it was, but I think, anybody listening or watching can imply can take what I'm talking about there at face value and understand what I'm saying. But the defense, this is practical. This is exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about iron sharpens iron. It is so good that the Ravens offense is going up against this defense, and honestly, vice versa. I mean, even though the offense struggled as a whole today, there were still those positive moments, which we will talk about. But this is the typical iron sharpens iron. I mean, for Lamar Jackson, he unofficially went 20 for 26 in 11-on-11s and 9 for 10 in 7-on-7s. But he did have 3 interceptions in those, interceptions. He had back-to-back interceptions at the end of practice. One of those obviously being the bobbled pass. So do you really chalk that up to Lamar? Do you chalk it up to Derrick Henry? Hit him in the hands. But yeah, it was underthrown balls that did Lamar Jackson in. On the final two, though, he had a target to Nelson Aguilar in the front corner of the end zone. That was Arthur Millette. And then Roquan Smith ended up making an incredible play to jump over Charlie Kohler to get the ball, tip the ball to himself, actually. So that's something. It's going to be really key for the Ravens to get or at least keep the turnover numbers down this season. This is day one of minicamp. I'm not reading too much into either side of things, the struggles or the domination. It's just you can't. If you read too far into it, you're going to you're going to put yourself into conversations based off of where we are in mid-June. What matters is where we are at the end of August in terms of those types of trends. If this continues, then that becomes a trend. But for now, I'm not super worried about it. Obviously, this is when you want to make the mistakes too, when it doesn't count, when it's in practice. This is exactly when you want to do it. You don't want to make it in the AFC Championship game. You don't want to make it in a game that matters. Get it all out of the way now. Figure out what's wrong. Get it under control. So I think they'll do that. But again, they're not going to not turn the ball over at all next season. They're going to have some of that as well. But Lamar Jackson did have some positives here. This was not all just the negative show for Lamar Jackson. Lamar had 4 for 6 on a drive and a move the ball drill, and had an incredible throw apparently to Nelson Aguilar. And then he also had Tylan Wallace, who also had a standout day. We talked about him on yesterday's show as a big player to watch in minicamp. There we go. In minicamp. But Tylan Wallace had a great day and had a back shoulder throw caught by him against Brandon Stevens. So that's going to be big. And apparently Lamar Jackson and T. Martin both scheduled to speak with reporters after today's practice. So we'll hear from both of them. Now, there were the positives. We talked about some of Lamar's positives, but Isaiah Likely made an incredible catch, a leaping one-handed grab on a floated pass from Lamar Jackson. And the Ravens had about 80 or so legacy players there, former players. And Jacoby Jones was one of them, and he was freaking out, apparently, at this Isaiah Likely catch. Likely is in for such a big year if he's utilized right by the Ravens. I'm so excited to see what Isaiah Likely can do this season. But we cannot forget about Mark Andrews. And certainly, based off of his minicamp performance yesterday, we are not going to forget about Mark Andrews. According to multiple people, could have been the best receiver on the field if you wanted to rank these guys. He ended up beating Roquan Smith for a catch and ended up getting a step on Jalen Davis as well, or Darius Washington. He ended up having a full extension catch on. So, look, when you're talking about how these drills work, you have to keep in mind that some favor the offense, others favor the defense, right? You're not going to, if you're a defender, you're not going to go and absolutely destroy your teammate who's trying to catch a ball. It's just, again, there's no pads on, right? You try to avoid contact when that happens. When pads come on, obviously it's a little different. But again, that's why we're talking about, well, the pads aren't on yet. So defenders generally avoid contact when they can. When you're talking about the offensive side of the ball, even on the offensive line, right, Pat, what can you take away from the offensive line? Obviously, there are a couple of things, both from offensive and defensively on that line, but it's not with pads on. So I just take everything with a grain of salt. But again, Tylan Wallace, he did emerge as a popular target. Tez Walker continued his strong workout start. He had a couple of catches throughout the day. Now, Marcus Williams, we talk about leaders. Marcus Williams apparently stepping up in the leader department for the Ravens and being heard, being vocal, and that's what the Ravens need. The Ravens did lose a lot of vets, and Marcus Williams he's in his 7th year. No, he's in his 8th year now, I think. Yeah, he's in his 8th year, which is crazy to think about, honestly. But he was being very vocal at practice, apparently, which was very good. Now, one thing that is concerning is Zay Flowers and the ball security. He struggled with it during OTAs. That, again, when we talk about things going over from one period to another, being consistent over the course of multiple practices or multiple weeks, that becomes a trend. Zay Flowers has to buck that trend. And it goes back even to the AFC Championship game when he fumbled that ball. In this one, he had a ball that was a short pass he caught, and then Arthur Millette punched it loose and recovered it. So you can't have that in the regular season. Again, I think that's going to be a very big point of emphasis for Zay Flowers. And look, catch it now. Catch it in June. It's exactly what I was talking about a couple of minutes ago. Catch it in June. Don't catch it in October or November or December or January when you actually need it. So there's a lot to like about this. I mean, the defense, when they shine, that's great because we know how dominant this defense was, how historic this defense was. We also know they lost a lot of players. So to hear about guys stepping up and guys making a name for themselves, and hopefully they can continue to do that over the course of mandatory minicamp. Coming up in the second part of the show, though, we're going to be talking about what else happened during day one of mandatory minicamp. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on the show. First, this show is brought to you by Gametime. I'm super excited to continue watching the NBA Finals, and for me, it would be super cool to go to a game. Gametime makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. And on the Gametime app, again, Mavericks, they're down 2-0 to the Celtics in the Finals. They're going back to Dallas. If you want tickets over on Gametime, go browse their selections. Also, you're talking about the Orioles. They're having a heck of a year. You can go on Gametime, look at that over the Baltimore area, and obviously for the Ravens, if you want to buy tickets over on Gametime, you can as well. For me, I'd love to go, if we're talking finals, to a closeout game. Maybe that'll be game 4. I don't know. But if I can't choose what game the closeout game is going to be, and spoiler alert, you can't, I'd probably go to the opening game. Now, the Gametime app has a lot of features, my favorite being last-minute deals. You can save up to 6% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. But the app also is just super easy to use. It has a really interactive interface, and it's not a hassle to use. It makes the Gametime app really easy, and part of those things that make the app easy to use, you get flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Down the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spell LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today, last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Wednesday. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in today. Again, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. Be sure to check out Peter Bukowski on Locked On Sports today if you want general sports news. Peter does a great job breaking it all down 5 days per week here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, really appreciate everybody for getting this show to 7,000 subscribers on YouTube. Another big milestone here. On the way to 8 now. And again, once we hit 10,000, those styrofoam cup, like the purple blue design styrofoam cups, I will wear a full outfit like that for an entire week. I promised that the first day I started here on YouTube, and I have not forgotten about it. I'll try to find the tweet if anybody can find it. Be my guest. I still up there probably, but I will stay true to that. Now let's keep going into what ended up happening day one, mandatory minicamp for the Ravens. Now, undrafted-wise, there are a couple of guys who made a name for themselves during, whether it was rookie minicamp, OTAs, but one of the minicamp standouts was undrafted rookie Isaiah Washington. He ended up connecting with backup quarterback Josh Johnson, and then also he ended up connecting with Josh Johnson again on a couple of grabs, back-to-back grabs, and had a jump ball on the sideline. Tylan Wallace was great and definitely improved his stock yesterday, but some of these other guys are coming for him. Malik Cunningham, Isaiah Washington, Dayton Wade, Kadir Ismail, right? All these guys are coming for Tylan Wallace, so he has to hold all these guys off because, you know, that 6th wide receiver spot, it's going to be interesting to see if it is Tylan Wallace or if somebody else ends up claiming it, or if they end up keeping 5 or even 7 guys. 7 just feels like so many, but again, we don't really know here. Rashad Bateman ended up beating Marlon Humphrey on a stop-and-go route, and then Humphrey got the better of Bateman on another play a few minutes later. So this is what I'm talking about. When we talked about Tez Walker and TJ Tampa, their battles during OTAs, it's the same thing, right? With Marlon and Rashad Bateman in minicamp, it's you're getting the best on your best, and you're trying to figure it out. And for Humphrey, he is Baltimore's best corner. For Rashad Bateman, I mean, Zay Flowers is probably the Ravens' best receiver, but still, you're getting your top guys on your top guys. Bateman's going to be a top receiver in this offense this season. And so it's nice to be able to go up against a guy like Marlon, who, by the way, did participate. So the Marlon Humphrey mystery is apparently over. But there is a new one with Kyle Hamilton, which we'll talk about in the final part of the show. Now, Trenton Simpson ended up getting some praise for blanketing running back Justice Hill. And that's part of the maturation process, the evolution process for Trenton Simpson, is just being able to get better day by day, because this is not just about, oh, Trenton Simpson's a really fast linebacker. This has to be about Trenton Simpson can cover. Trenton Simpson can work in space, which he can. Trenton Simpson can work in space, but there are other elements that Trenton Simpson has to evolve in order to make a big impact consistently for the Ravens this season. And to hear that, look, he's getting his coverage goes up, as well as one of the main criticisms of Patrick Queen. He couldn't cover. That was one of the main criticisms that Patrick Queen had last season. And I mean, I guess it wasn't so much last season. It happened a little, but that was way early on in his career, where it was like he got benched against Kansas City because he couldn't contain Travis Kelce early in his career. And, there were instances where he just couldn't cover. Trent Simpson, I believe, it's going to be so valuable because Roquan Smith already can cover. People look at Roquan as this big, bulky linebacker that, is just a super enforcer. Roquan can cover. Roquan can cover. So if you have two cover linebackers out there who excel at that, Roquan does, Trent Simpson can get there, that would be really, really big. So again, guys stepping up all over the place. And part of the offensive struggles ended up being the fact that there were multiple false starts that were penalized, and the players actually have to run a lap when that happens. So Zay Flowers, Ronnie Stanley, Sean Ryan, Daniel Falele, Rashad Bateman, Josh Johnson all ran laps, and all but one of those was a false start. One was an illegal motion. So look, you have a new offensive line. Guys are going to come in and try to work through things, but you get it out now, right? Learn the snap counts, learn the hard counts, get everything going, get it out now. Do not get it out when you're talking about a game that matters. I'll keep hammering home that message because it really is so, so important here. Now, in terms of other guys who were stepping up, at the end of the day, Baltimore's going to need I call it three levels. I've kind of gone through this analogy before, where you have your star players, right? Lamar Jackson had an up and down day, but I'd classify outside of the interceptions, it was decent. Now, the interceptions are a big part of that, but you have your star players stepping up. Then you need your middle tier guys, right? Maybe young players who are expected to break out, some other guys along those lines. And then you have to have your unsung heroes, guys who maybe aren't expected to do anything, but end up playing a big role. So it just makes a lot of sense for Baltimore, who was relying on a lot of young guys this year, to be able to figure it out now and not necessarily go and, make a mistake when it actually counts. Now, in terms of the rough practice for Baltimore's offense, one more point on that. There were nice plays down the field for Baltimore's offense, but the penalties, the turnovers, that's all stuff that has to be cleaned up. So looking ahead to today, I just think being able to establish more of a rhythm for the offense is key. This defense is tough. This defense is really tough, and it goes back to iron sharpens iron, but can there be more of a rhythm, cleaning up on the penalties and the turnovers, so the defense can they continue their strong play? Can they not get beat? Can they force a couple more turnovers? Because whenever we talk about one unit dominating, it means the other unit struggled. Doesn't mean that both units can't have good and bad plays, but when there is a general winner on a day, it means, okay, well, we talk all this good about that unit. Well, it's because the other unit didn't play well. So you're always going to have days the offense wins, the defense wins. Sometimes it can be even, and that's fine. But the Ravens have a lot to look forward to over these next couple of days before their decently long break before training camp starts. And I'm glad that, again, there were no issues in terms of guys not showing up, unexcused. I mean, look, there were plenty of teams that we heard about yesterday that there were certainly guys that were not excused that did not show up, and that was a huge issue. But overall, solid day. In fact, a dominant day for the defense. Stars stepping up, middle tier guys stepping up, and unsung heroes stepping up. There were still guys stepping up on the offense, but defense wins day one. Can the offense take one back and win day two? We're going to have to find out. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we'll talk about general notes from training camp, some injury statuses, some absences as well. So be sure to stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on the show. We're back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Wednesday, and really appreciate everybody for being here with me today and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. Be sure to, again, subscribe, follow along, video form and audio form. We built up amazing communities here, video form, audio form, social media, subtext. By the way, I'm starting up my Instagram again. I mentioned it on yesterday's show. I'm trying. I try to start it up. I get too busy and then I neglect it. It started up again, get too busy. So we're trying to break the trend, trying to make this a thing. So be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChaosStriker34. Now let's get into some general takeaways from mandatory minicamp and talk about who was there, who wasn't there, who was participating, who wasn't. Now, again, there were no unexcused absences for the Ravens. There was an excused absence, though, in terms of Deontay Hardy, whose baby is in the hospital right now. So he's staying with family this week. So obviously prayers to Deontay Hardy and his family and his child. That's nothing to take lightly. So hopefully everything is get sorted out there. But excused absence for Deontay Hardy due to that. But other than that, we had a Kyle Hamilton mystery, which was very interesting. I don't think anybody really expected to have a Kyle Hamilton mystery, but he was not participating. He was just in street clothes watching. And John Harbaugh said after practice that he had some loose bodies removed from his elbow. He'll be ready for training camp, though. So he wasn't practicing during OTAs, and people were wondering, well, why isn't he practicing? Why isn't he practicing? Although I don't think it was made that big of a deal. I think people were more interested in the Marlon Humphrey situation once that became a thing. But with that long layoff before training camp, John Harbaugh saying he'll be ready. So let's knock on wood that he will be ready for training camp. Now, other guys who were not participating, Adisa Isaac was doing work on a side field, but Keaton Mitchell, his knee, he was not there. Christian Matthew and Rashad Nichols also, according to Jess Rebeck, were not there as well. So for the Ravens, there's nothing too crazy to report there. I mentioned Bo Braid. He was back from the ankle injury, so that was good news. But I hope, and I knock on wood, that there will not be any crazy mini camp and when we get to training camp, those types of injuries. Just hoping Baltimore can stay healthy, get their guys back as opposed to losing guys. That's going to be the big one. Now, according to Derrick Henry, this was the storyline, I think, of the day in terms of the press conferences, or at least one of them. Derrick Henry has never had a bad meal in Baltimore so far. And you might ask, what are you talking about? Why is that a storyline? Well, in case you missed it, Patrick Queen bashed on Baltimore food a couple weeks ago and said that, the Pittsburgh food is better. He's not a seafood guy. He likes true food. And then Derrick Henry comes on and says, hey, I love it. Never had a bad meal here. And, shouts out Jimmy Seafood in a bunch of places. So now we are turning this into a bit of a food war in terms of what Derrick Henry back in Baltimore food, Patrick Queen back in Pittsburgh food. So once you get to those Ravens-Steelers matchups, not only is there intrigue with Derrick Henry and Patrick Queen just from a football perspective, but I think whoever wins that matchup is going to take the food crown with them as well. Now, Henry said that it's challenging for him, or he's embracing the challenge to learn a new offensive system, new terminology. He's been a sponge, but it is definitely different terminology. And look, he's been in Tennessee all this time, and he's gone through new systems there, but this is a new team. This is the first time he has played for a team outside of the Titans. And so, although it is a challenge, Derrick Henry is certainly more than up to it. So, going to be interesting to see how long that process takes. Obviously, Baltimore's going to try to establish a role. Now, actually, during the practice, there were multiple plays of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry connecting on passes. One of them being Derrick Henry lining up all the way out wide and catching a pass in the end zone. Then the other one, just Henry's in the backfield lined up there. So could we see some Derrick Henry receiver action? I think we will. Henry actually is a very underrated player out of the backfield. It's something I wanted to see out of this Baltimore offense consistently for a really long time. We were going to get it in 2021, but then J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards went down and they had to, scramble and shift their entire philosophy, sign a bunch of backs that weren't in their prime anymore. And that is essentially what happened to that. Now, that's gonna be interesting, though, because with Baltimore and how they're going to split up Henry's workload compared to Keaton Mitchell when he gets back, compared to Justice Hill as well, I don't necessarily know what it's going to look like. But what I do know, Derrick Henry is going to be the bell cow in that offense. Now, Keaton Mitchell will get his, Justice Hill will get his, but we're going to see. Derrick Henry also said that the Ravens organization has been a brotherhood as expected, and it's come easy to him and Lamar. He talked about everybody playing for each other and picking each other up. And, the culture, he said, is very strong, which a lot of players who come through Baltimore, especially veterans, we've heard this story before of them really embracing the culture, liking the culture, and everything that comes with that. Now, we mentioned Trenton Simpson a bit earlier in the show. Roquan Smith got up on that podium and praised Trenton Simpson, saying that, quote, I know he doesn't understand how fast, how explosive, how powerful he is. So there's a lot of untapped potential with Trenton Simpson. Everybody knows that. It's about honing that, though. And maybe that takes a short amount of time. Maybe it takes a really long amount of time. But Trenton Simpson has a lot of potential. And I think having a guy like Roquan on that defense, especially playing next to a guy like Roquan, there is that Roquan bump. And I think there is an even bigger Roquan bump for the guys playing right next to him. Obviously, Patrick Queen got a massive Roquan bump. And I think that Trenton Simpson will get that as well. Now, Ronnie Stanley got up on the podium and says that he feels as quick and as athletic as he has ever been, says he feels great. Also, when asked about when he last felt this good, said that before the 2020 season. So almost 4 years ago, Ronnie Stanley has not felt this good. Now, obviously, he has to show that on the field, but look, I'm glad he's at least saying it. Now, there's one thing between him saying it and staying healthy for a full season. I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself here because obviously we are, again, in mid-June, or at least coming up on mid-June. But Stanley also talked about how, it eats away at him, the AFC Championship loss, which a lot of the Ravens players and his teammates share that. At the end of the day, this whole team is motivated to avenge that. And again, are you going to get quote-unquote revenge in the regular season? I mean, I guess you could technically classify it as that, but you're not getting revenge into the playoffs, in my opinion. That's where that is for me. John Harbaugh talked about how the Ravens had those pre-snap problems we mentioned, said that there was new emphasis on quarterback cadence at the line of scrimmage, and saying that the Ravens think cadence is a weapon. So maybe we see a bunch of that this year where the Ravens switch up their cadences throughout the game, try to get the defenses to jump, especially maybe on third and short situations. That could be a really big weapon for them as well. Now, Harbaugh also mentioned that he really wants a starting offensive lineman at the earliest possible time, says the earlier the better on those offensive lines, getting everybody situated. The hope is to have 4 or 5 spots locked in before preseason games start, but he did acknowledge the process could drag on. I think there are a lot of talented guys competing for spots. Obviously, I think everybody has their favorites for the positions. I think everybody thinks is going to be Andrew Voorhees, Ben Cleveland, or Raza Rosengarten snapping up those 3 spots, but there are other guys competing, like a Daniel Falele, a Josh Jones, Saleh, even Patrick McCary. So to have all those locked up before the preseason games start, I don't know. I just don't feel like that's realistic, but I think there could be clear favorites at that point, and then a couple strong performances maybe could solidify that. So eventful day of minicamp for the Ravens, day 1, and we will get back right here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens, talk about everything that happened on day 2, who's trending in the right direction, who's trending in the wrong direction, a lot more of that. 5 days a week Ravens coverage on Locked On Ravens. Again, thank you so much for tuning in today. That's all I have for you. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content. Stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.